something, and like,
oh my gosh,
he kept trying to start
forward action.
Yeah.
All right, so welcome everyone. And yeah, what I was just saying is that like Mallory and I would probably be doing this even if it wasn't on the Zoom call. We'd just be hanging out, singing together, chanting together, talking about India, talking about Krishna, maybe sharing some food. And basically what I'm doing tonight is trying to open this up and just invite some people in to hear the story if you're curious. It looks like there are a couple things coming in the chat in terms of happy to hear about the trip. Kelly E, so sweet. I love your spirit, the way you move in the world. Also very curious about India, as you might go for a month in the fall. It's a radical trip to go on to the motherland, right? We'll talk all about that. I'm not going to let myself say too much more before we do an invocation. It's nice to do an invocation because we can actually call in the essence and the spirit and the energy and the intention really for why we're here, why we're doing this. So that being said, that's going to be our first musical number. And then I'll come back and do some sharing. I've got a little presentation and some slides I want to share with you all as well. So before we officially begin, I'll probably do a little sound check with you guys just to make sure that everyone can hear. Sometimes it gets a little complicated on Zoom with the harmonium. So I'm going to use, why isn't that mic showing up? Okay, for some reason, the mic isn't going through. So wherever you're joining us from, feel free to just take a minute to get yourself centered, maybe take a couple of deeper breaths, and I want to say relax, but really more just like open to how you're doing. Ask yourself how you're doing in this moment, how you're doing today, and checking back in again with that intention that we all sort of presenced for ourselves at the beginning as to why we're here. Get a better camera angle here. No problem, Joanne. You know what, Mallory? I may have you actually change the slides this time, so you guys aren't left totally in the dark.
Am I just clicking?
Yeah,
Okay, I can click.
It'll be obvious.
I had a good clicker.
I don't usually do these talks with like musical instruments involved, so it's an added element. Yeah, I think if you just press the arrow button.
This one.
Yeah. Oh, and for any and all of this, you're welcome to sing along, of course. So we're actually going to chant the sound of Om 3 times to lead into this. You're welcome to join me for that if you'd like. Nice deep inhale. And inhaling. Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Govardhani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshakarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Krishna Bhagavan ki Jai Harinam Sankirtan ki
Jai.
Jai Hari Hari Bol. Hi everyone again. How is the sound? Could you hear the harmonium? I'm getting thumbs up. Okay, great. Sometimes you try to play the harmonium on Zoom and it's like it's a no-go. It comes through all this like distorted sound and everything. But anyways, were you able to see the screen as well for with the lyrics? Great. So welcome officially to Stories and Songs from India. I posted this in my Facebook post when I announced this talk that I'm doing, is that this was basically my mom's idea. And as a typical, maybe more teenage-like thing for a son to do, that maybe I've retained some of that teenager essence. When my mom suggested that I do it, I was like, that's so stupid. Nobody would want to hear about my stories or hear the songs that I would sing. But actually, as soon as I started saying it, I'm like, you know what, she's right. I really should do this, because basically people kept on asking me, how was your time in India? How was your time in India? So if you don't already know, I had the privilege, the opportunity, the gift, I mean, the blessing, really, to spend the month of January at the Govardhan Eco Village in about 2 hours outside of Mumbai in India. So that was how I rang in my 2023. And I was doing some sort of cryptic things in terms of, you know, I made a couple of posts around like building up to the trip and feeling a bit nervous for it. Some of you may have seen this one. I posted my ticket the day I was leaving, and basically the caption of this post kind of turned into, as I was writing it, like, I don't want to go. I was leading up to this massively exciting trip that I was feeling very enthusiastic about in the months prior when I first signed on for the trip. But I kind of got that like last minute cold feet, hesitation. And thankfully at this point, I've done enough traveling. I've done enough big things in my life, I guess, sort of scary leaps of faith and transitions, that I sort of understand that this is just like a textbook part of the equation where like, okay, before the big kind of life altering experience, you're going to face a lot of resistance. You're going to face a lot of fear. But yeah, I'm just thinking back in this moment to like, there's a world in which I would have been like, you know what? Let's just cancel this whole thing. I was like almost this close to doing that because this fear of the unknown was really what was coming up. But I did, after all, actually make it through and went to the trip, and it completely changed my life. So much so that when I came back, I was back in the same place that I was before I left, where I was like, I don't know anything again. Like, why did I even go? What do I do with this now that I'm back? And I'm going to talk a little bit about why that's the case. So we started with an invocation just to really call on our spiritual masters. We call them our acharyas, the sages, the leaders who have kind of walked the walk and talked the talk and also handed this stuff down to us through a disciplic succession. I find that to be so beautiful about the spiritual path in general. It's like we don't actually even have to figure this stuff out on our own. It's because of the spiritual master. It's because of my teachers. It's because of my priests. It's because of my mentors that I've actually had my own awareness illuminated. I was walking around in darkness, ignorant. And that's sort of the essence of this very first prayer. I was born ignorant. I'm actually getting to spend a lot of time right now with a 10-month-old toddler, #Manny. And I think about it all the time watching her. You know, it's just like she's just kind of born into this world, this very pure, sweet presence. And I can see that she's sort of formulating and taking in patterns and recognizing her world around her, her relationships. And she's kind of like coding her mind for what this experience is going to be in the world, in her life. And she kind of was, we get born into this world and we don't really remember what happened in those moments before our birth. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how the Bhakti Yoga lineage thinks about that. I want to give a little bit of an introduction. So my name is Patrick. If we haven't officially met, it's nice to meet you. I'm really passionate about connecting people to their potential and developing their mind, body, spirit, health, really, like the health of their mind, their health of their body, their health of their spirit, through the stages of development that we move through. I don't think health is a one and done thing. It's not just something you kind of land at and it sustains for the rest of your life. It's very dynamic. We're constantly having to ebb and flow and make adjustments for balance and reorient and return, realign. And I'm speaking most of this not only from my lived experience, but I've also been in the coaching space as a yoga teacher as well as a health coach for the last 2 or so years. In my yoga teaching, as I put here, I'm ever more, deeper and deeper and deeper, a fan of Bhakti Yoga. If you're not familiar with Bhakti Yoga, a lot of you may have heard of yoga before. You think downward facing dog, or you think going upside down, or you think of India. Bhakti Yoga is actually the yoga of love and devotion and service. So we'll flesh that out a little bit more, why to me it's just like there's no path that beats Bhakti Yoga. And I'm feeling very, what's the word? Just enlivened with Bhakti, especially after that month in India in January, but also as a result of all the people that I've been hanging out with and the conversations that I'm listening to lately. In my yoga teaching too, I really get into biomechanics and anatomy. I lead a online dynamic community that is really around kind of like identity evolution and getting to your best health. That's called Journey to You. Journey to the Peak is the monthly yoga community that I have online. I listed a couple of my certifications. And then I also have some VIP coaching clients that I work with. I've probably been doing these free talks for like, I don't know, it's like almost a little over a year now. So it kind of looks nice seeing them all up here on the slide, actually. It's like, oh, hey, I remember when I started doing this. So I'm very, very passionate about providing people with free content that can help them up-level their life, their health. This, for example, was a talk that I gave on the negativity bias and the fact that every single one of us, from an evolutionary perspective, we have to reckon with this negativity bias. Sometimes you feel like you're in a negative mood. Well, you're actually hardwired that way because it used to be the way that we'd survive. So in this talk, we talked about using somatic practices, matter over mind, to override negativity bias. The good news is all of these workshops are available. If you go to my website, there's a tab called free webinars, and you can check any of those out if you would like. I also teach yoga local in Chatham. Okay, what is this doing here? Well, in thinking about who I am, it's really interesting because for the probably 10 plus years between when I went to college and then when I moved into New York City, I was acting. I was a professional actor in the musical theater world, and I had the chance to play roles like Albert Peterson in Bye Bye Birdie, to do national tours like 42nd Street and Anything Goes. There was even times when, due to actors being sick or having to call out, I got to dress up as an old man and go on stage and play Pops in Gypsy. And there is a reason why I included this slide. We'll probably circle back to it over the course of the talk. But I also think it's a kind of a fundamental piece of my journey, my identity as a storyteller, really. I remember someone once asked me, like, what's acting really about? What's acting really about underneath it all? Because, acting can have maybe a little bit of like an air of ego, right? The ego can really come through. Sometimes it's all about me. Who's the spotlight on? Who's getting the applause? And then when they asked me that question, what's acting really all about? It came through eventually. It's like, okay, storytelling. Actually, we're up there telling stories. And it's been a fascinating journey to see how this actually transfers and translates into what I get to do as a yoga teacher and on the Bhakti path. Why did I put this one here? Well, this is one of my teachers, Raghunath, who led the training at the Govardhan Eco Village in India. So I was with Raghu and a group of probably 50 or 60 other people at this retreat center, the Govardhan Eco Village, for that month. And the reason I included the picture here is that as I'm introducing myself to you all, yes, I'm an actor. Yes, I teach yoga in Chatham. Yes, I give these free talks. Yes, I have these communities. Yes, I go stand on the beach and pose for pictures. But really, at the end of the day, what it all comes down to is this mantra that this enthusiastic Italian man has sort of just like screamed into my consciousness time and time and time again. This idea that I'm not really actually this body at the end of the day. I'm not really actually even this mind at the end of the day. At the end of the day, I'm the spirit soul. I'm the soul that is contained within this form. Haribol. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. I wanted to include a picture of another one of my mentors, Kate Stillman, who really helped me focus a lot more on this idea of who I'm becoming instead of just being stuck in the conditioning of who I've already been. What happens with conditioning, it's really interesting, is there's a weight to it in the same way that gravity weighs upon us. And so it can be very easy in some ways to just repeat what you did the day before again and again and again and again. And a huge part of my yoga path has been understanding that actually every single day I have the chance to become someone new. Not in the sense that I'm wiping the entire slate clean and starting fresh. Sometimes I do need that, but rather that I get to be a collaborator with the present moment, with the day, with the situation, with the relationship, whatever it is. And I just wanted to throw that out there too, in terms of this, like, obeisances to my teachers who have really set me on this path. I included a picture here of His Holiness Radhanath Swami because the Govardhan Eco Village, where I got to spend the month, is his project. And with his devotees, they built just the most incredible environment. And I'll talk to you about why I feel it is such an incredible environment. Now, why are you here? That's kind of what I was asking earlier too. Why are you here? We had some people put in the chat already as to why they're here, and thank you for sharing. I was guessing that you're here because you're curious about or interested in spiritual life, but also that you're interested in supporting. It's a really beautiful thing that I'm learning to open up lately, is like, if someone wants to support me, I will let them. Please, I'll take the support. Because I had a conditioning, I had a pattern in the past of almost like being resistant to it, right? So if you're here to offer support, thank you. And if you're looking to receive support, sometimes it's just nice to come together sit with one another, hear stories. And hear story. There's a lot of different stories that we could hear out there, right? Like there's a quality to the type of story that we listen to. So in Bhakti Yoga, we really pay attention to that quality and we look for the highest quality. We look for the stories that give us the highest quality, the highest taste, the highest truth in a way. So you came to the right place if you're looking to receive some support, because those are the kind of songs that we're going to be singing tonight. We probably won't do too much singing. I'll do more talking than singing, but we've got some more numbers planned for you. So to help frame some of this out, because we've got a wide swath of people here today. Some people that I know from my childhood, my grandparents are here, my mom is here, my brother's here, some people that I know from my acting life, and then some people that I know from my yoga life, this bhakti path that I've been walking. So first of all, even just saying that kind of gives me the goosebumps. That it's so cool the way that the convergence of all those paths coming together is a really sweet thing. So thank you so much for coming and watching the recording. If you're watching the recording, to help us frame this a little bit, it's fascinating because this just came up in a book that I was reading, that I'm currently reading, called Grace and Grit by Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber is a thought leader. He's behind integral evolutionary theory. And in this book, he's having a conversation with his lover, and he's describing to them that there's a perennial philosophy. Perennial means what? Basically eternal, all the time, sort of lasting. And the perennial philosophy that we actually end up seeing through most religions and spiritualities is that the worldview, it's the worldview that's been embraced by majority of world's greatest spiritual teachers, philosophers, thinkers, and even scientists. And it tends to have the following things in common, regardless of what faith that you're coming from. First point is just that the spirit exists. Spirit exists, and well, I won't say more on that because it can you could unpack that quite a lot. And I like the way he's given 7 points that I'm going to show you on these next couple of slides, and then we'll see how this ties into some of the stories that I want to share with you about my time at the Eco Village. Spirit exists, that's one. The second is that spirit is found within. Third is that most of us don't realize that this spirit is found within us. However, because we are living in a world of sin, illusion, separation, duality, it's kind of like spin the wheel and pick your word for it. We forget that spirit even exists, and we also forget that it's inside of us. Fourth point here is that there's a way out of this fallen state. There's a way out of this illusion, this duality, this separation, and there's actually a path that we can walk that will take us to our liberation. If we follow the path to its conclusion, the result is, again, call it what you call it, different traditions call it different things, the result is a rebirth. It's an enlightenment. And that comes from, and this is really important, it's in italics not only in the book, but here, it comes from direct experience of spirit within. So direct experience is different than, me hearing about what it's like to be a mother, for example. I've never had that direct experience. I've heard about it. I've had a mother. I've hung out with a lot of mothers. They've shared with me some of the struggles and this or that, but I've never had the direct experience. On this path that people get to walk to sort of move out of however it is that you think about this state of illusion, the state of fear, separation, or duality. On this path, we get to walk it and actually get to have a direct experience of spirit within. Then sin and suffering come to an end. And this is one of my favorite points, the last point that he makes on this, because it so much aligns with the bhakti path that I'm walking, is that then from all of that comes social action of mercy and compassion on behalf of all sentient beings. So we get to share what we experienced. We get to share what we realized. And it just gives me pause. It gives me pause because people have shared with me, and then that sharing with other people, it almost just becomes instinctive. It almost just becomes reflexive. I think to the way that the Christians speak about it in terms of like good news. Mm-hmm. You ever get some good news? You want to tell everybody, right? You're super excited. Have you heard the good news? So there's this spreading outward that will then come. Okay. Peak experience and integration. The reason I put a peak experience thing here is because what happened to me, the way that I think about what happened in India for those 30 days, it was a peak experience. You know, I didn't include this on the slides, but I'll just see if I can find it really fast. If you look at the hero's journey, there's that kind of famous circle, right? It's said that the hero leaves the ordinary world and goes into the special world. So for me, very much like India, GEV, or the Govardhan Eco Village for short, was special world. I was stepping out of that ordinary world and kind of diving into, and frankly, I should show you guys a better one, not just the schedule of the day. Because it speaks directly also to like that resistance that I faced, you know, going into the trip. That every hero on the hero's journey, they're going to have the call, but they're also going to have this refusal of the call. They're going to find an aid, a mentor, and then there's going to be a crossing of the threshold where you'll find new allies, enemies. There's going to be trials and tribulations. There's going to be a whole ordeal. I think particularly interesting that Hero's Journey talks about initiation, when in Gaudiya Vaishnavism or Bhakti Yoga path, a lot of even just Hindu or Indian paths, you could get formally initiated actually into the tradition or the lineage. Death, battle with the brother. Oh, watch out, Michael. Temptation, the road back, refusal to return. We could talk a little bit about that because it was really hard coming back from India. Really, really hard. The ultimate reward and the master of two worlds. I think of the hero's journey as something that's iterative. So again, it's not just a one and done thing, but there are different parts of my development. I believe we develop across multiple lines of intelligence, right? They're all at their own stages in their hero's journey, right? So in one sense, I made my return from India. I had to face all these things, but in another sense, I'm probably in the unknown world in another way of my life, right? Okay, let's get back to the presentation. So India was kind of a peak experience. With every peak experience, what is actually also required is integration. In a peak experience, you might have realizations. You might have new insights. You might acquire new knowledge, get new friends, whatever that is. All of that stuff kind of needs time to get integrated into your being, integrated into your identity. And integration, it really takes time. I like that they have these puzzle pieces here because sometimes there is a little bit of that like, where does this piece go? This is really pretty, it's super meaningful, but I don't know where this piece goes and where it all fits in. So with integration, it's like, I think of the retreat in some ways, you know, my time at the Eco Village, it's still going. It's still going. I'm still integrating. I probably still will be for the rest of this year, arguably. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the peak experience of me being at GEV. What made it a peak experience? Why was it so transformational? And yeah, just to kind of name some of those things so we have some concrete takeaways that we can take away from this. This is another phrase that I got from Kate, who I showed us a couple slides back, and I think she got it from her teacher, Craig Hamilton, but it probably also falls into that category of perennial wisdom, that structure precedes evolution. Structure precedes evolution. So if you want to grow, if you want to develop, if you want to go somewhere, you need some sort of structure to actually get you there. And I found that the time at the Govardhan Eco Village, it was a highly structured environment in many different ways. But one of the ways that I want to tell you a little bit about is like just the schedule. So this was basically the day that I had for 30 days in a row when I was in India. And I again, structure, it wasn't just amorphous. It wasn't just like I'm going to wake up whenever I feel like it. I'm going to go for breakfast when I feel like it. Everything had a time and a place and a structure, including my morning alarm, which usually rang about 4 a.m. And I was up and I was actually very excited to get up. I was in the shower, and I knew I had to be out of my bedroom by 4:15 if I wanted to make it to the first program at the temple, which is called Mangalarti, at 4:30 in the morning. The Mangalarti morning program was probably one of the most special things about my trip, not only because it was an opportunity for me to sort of be in front of the deities and to be seen by the deities, and I could speak at length about that, but we could also just speak at length about this time of the morning. There's a very special, sweet, etheric quality to what the yogis call Brahma Muhurt. Brahma means God in some way, and Muhurt means hour. Or Brahma could be creator as well. So hour of the creator. Each of us, made in the likeness of the creator, are creators in our own lives. So if you're trying to create something, that's a very powerful time of day to be awake and to be intentional with your consciousness. And so being in how many people would come to Mangalarti? It's like not a ton usually. It was like maybe, I don't know, 20 or 30, unless it was a weekend where there would be like 50 or 60 people. Try hanging out with like 60 people at 4:30 a.m. It's actually kind of ecstatic when you're all singing, when you're all praying together, when you're all chanting. So yeah, that was the morning program. And then by 5:30, I was going across campus to go to Raghu's satsang. My teacher Raghunath would have the morning satsang for our group at 5:30 in the morning, where we would just basically discuss Vedic thought and stories and hear pastimes of Krishna's Leela and read verses from the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, there was a lot of different stuff that was discussed in those morning satsangs, but a sangha or a satsang is really its truthful association. So you're going to find, as I continue to talk about my experience in India, there's going to be some themes, and they're around things like truth and goodness and evenness and honesty and service and love. And this is it's worth pointing out. Every day at 7 in the morning, we had a yoga class, which was a great way to just like move my body. My physical practice really elevated when I was there for the month. I included the meals on here too, because like when you can be eating your meals at the same time every single day, that will work wonders for your digestion. Like I had no idea. And I got to have an Ayurvedic consult with the doctor there, and he kind of told me, he's like, when you go home, try to maintain this. Give yourself 30, 40-minute window of grace, but the body wants that structure. It wants those downbeats in a way. We talked about this a lot in the last talk that I gave, is like we're very rhythmic, and it's nice in rhythm when you know where the downbeat is. From 10 to 12, we would have our lessons. 1 o'clock was lunch. 3 to 5, we'd have more lessons. I did 2 programs specifically when I was over there. One of them was a Kirtan Academy. I had a slide for this. So learning more on the harmonium, which is what I'm excited to share with you all tonight, and learning like also the essence of what's happening when we're playing on the harmonium and we're singing. And then the other training that I did was a wisdom training. So talking a bit more specifically about how one actually becomes wise. What is the difference between wisdom and knowledge, and how we can ascertain some of these things from the Vedic texts and scriptures. Okay, where to go next? So yeah, this was the schedule, and it's kind of funny because I think in my life, first of all, with COVID-19, that just like stopped all things structured. Whatever structure I had, it kind of blew it all apart. And that was the welcome invitation, actually. It was like, oh, well, what would I do with my day if I don't have to go to work, right? If I'm not allowed to like really go see anybody or go, I don't know, can't see your friends in the beginning of the pandemic, how would I actually like to design my day? And I started playing around with it a little bit and designing it more intentionally. But then when I moved up here to Chatham, I had this idea that like I was going to work from home, I was going to live by myself, and it was going to be sweet. And it was really hard, actually. It was really hard because I didn't have that structure. I didn't have the people to show up with, or the times that someone was serving. It was just up to me, basically. And so one of the things I feel like actually happened is it all sort of went the wayside and got like depressed. It got kind of dark. But it's in that darkness, I think, that we actually start to really discern what's important, and we can see the light much more clearly when we're in the dark. I should also say that if there's questions throughout this, please feel free to either raise your hand, or if there's something that you want to add or correct me on, you're more than welcome to do any of those things. I'm going to go back to my presentation here. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about japa meditation, because it was a practice that became very dear to me while I was spending my time in India. And it remains very dear to me, but I have to say, first of all, it doesn't always look like this, as you can imagine. This was a staged photograph, full disclosure. But I can also see and feel the mood of the environment and the steps that I'm sitting on just by looking back at it. So japa meditation, who here has a meditation practice? Anyone have a meditation practice? Raise your hand if you've done some meditating in your day. Michael, Joanne's done some meditating. George, I know you've done some meditating. All right. Jane has a meditation practice. So japa meditation is actually not a far cry from meditating on rosary beads. You're chanting on prayer beads, basically. And so this is the same bag that you see pictured there. And inside the bag are the mala beads. And on every single bead, you chant a mantra. The mantra that I was chanting on the beads while I was in India was one of the mantras that I sang earlier for you. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And the idea is that you say that mantra on the bead, and then you go to the next bead, and you say, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And you do that 108 times until you get all the way around. And my goal basically for my time when I was there was to do that 16 times. I don't know how many times that actually is chanting the mantra, but it's a lot. And you know what? I gotta say, it was like no problemo when I was in India to chant 16 rounds, because I felt the desire to do it. I wanted constantly to be connected with that idea of God, that idea of spirit, like we spoke about earlier. Because what happens? I forget as I go through my life, even when I was in India, my consciousness is conditioned so it would go back to its old way of thinking. Thinking a little bit more of trying to put me first, what I desire, what I want, right? Instead of really staying connected in that form of God consciousness. So japa meditation is just like, it's a great way to just keep putting God back into your mind again and again and again and again and again. And to really remember. And another thing that I like about it is that it just kind of also helps with your focus. It can be kind of easy for our mind to wander off this way or that way. But the tangible feeling of having the beads, fingers go from one bead to the next, it just sort of keeps you locked in, almost like you sort of get into a track, and then it goes. Does this make sense a little bit? I'm seeing some nods. All right, good. Hey, Flora. What's going on, Flora? People are rolling on in here. Nice. Okay, so here's another thing I want to talk about that I feel really made the Govardhan Eco Village such a special environment, is that it was in this mood of what the yogis would call sattva. So yogis break down the modes of nature by calling them the 3 different gunas. I want to make this as simple as possible. Sattva is that middle one. Rajas is a bit more fiery. It's a bit more passionate. It's a bit more agitated, if you will. And then on the other end of that, you have the polar opposite of what all those qualities would be. A bit more dull, a bit more lazy, sluggish. Everything I encountered, almost everything I encountered, except for maybe the conditioning of my own mind, while I was at the Govardhan Eco Village that month of January, was in a mood of sattva. It was calm. It was revealing of awareness. The mind was present. There was wisdom. There was happiness. There was freedom of desire. Truth was there to interpret our experience, and also to really allow for proper discrimination. Am I understanding my experience in an honest way? and in a way that facilitates self-inquiry. It's spoken in the Bhagavad Gita, actually, that like material nature consists of these three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance, right? Also known as sattva, rajas, or tamas. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, they then become conditioned by those modes. To me, I like to think of this as part of the forgetting process, right? Because we're conditioned by these modes, we forgot about that true spark that really is us, that thing that outlasts us even when our physical body fails and dies, that the spark of our soul continues on. It's not subject to these modes. But since we're in this material world, we too have to come into contact with nature, and we become conditioned by the modes. O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating. So that sattvic mode, it's illuminating, it frees one from sinful reactions. And those that become situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. So conditioning isn't always bad. We can actually condition ourselves in a way to orient more towards that sense of goodness, more towards that sense of truth, happiness, and knowledge. This even pertains to our food. Our food can have a sattvic quality. It can have a rajasic quality. It can have a quality of more fire, or a more quality of heaviness, if you will. And so I included a couple of verses here that speak also about foods. And that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that foods dear to those in the mode of goodness increase the duration of life. They purify one's existence. They give strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. Such foods are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. I read that and I just think, why don't I eat that way all the time? It's just like it's writing's on the wall right here. Why don't I just eat this way all the time? So that was all building up to talk a little bit about the food that we were served for the month of, when I was there for the month of January. 100% vegetarian diet also would be called an ahimsa diet. Ahimsa in Sanskrit means nonviolence. So the yogis have this ethical precept that if we can take in food and sustain and nourish ourselves without having to cause violence to another being, then that's the way that we're gonna do it, because it's a fundamental moral and tenet of our faith that we don't do harm to others or to our own self. So even just that, actually, from a vibrational level, when you think about it, the food becomes very pure. What to speak of how nice it tastes because of the way that they've cooked it here. And so this was probably a typical meal that we would have gotten for lunch. Breakfasts was also savory breakfast in India a lot of times. I remember the first time I was in India, I was walking around by myself in the morning and I was looking for like, where can I just get like an omelet and some toast and some coffee? Not really what you're going to find if you're just walking around India. I mean, maybe they might have some place that could make that, but it wouldn't be uncommon that you'd get served a savory soup, right? A sort of a spicy soup for breakfast in the morning. So there was a little bit of getting used to in terms of that, but I was so satisfied with the food. And when you don't have to worry about preparing your own food, cooking your own food, that opens up a lot of economy for your consciousness too, to actually get to do other things. It gives you bandwidth in a way. So that was really, really sweet. Who's pictured with me here, his name is Yash, and he was serving out the food almost every day, and he made it the point to learn each of our names, and so I kind of associate this with him. All right. There are a few other things that I want to mention here. And I'm also looking, we've got about like 15 minutes left and I want to leave some room for questions. So I'm going to go into one more of my stories here, and it's around the words that you see on the screen. This too. I would say that this too actually ended up becoming my second mantra in a way. I was going to do a slide that said the following, but I didn't. I was going to do a slide that said purification isn't always pretty. Because basically the process of spiritual advancement could be thought of as purification, right? You become more spiritually advanced, more spiritually evolved over time, and a purity kind of arises. You don't look at anybody who's becoming spiritually advanced and being like, they're just getting way more toxic. You know, the more spiritual advancement they make, they get more toxic. It doesn't work that way. You get more pure. But what does that mean? It means the toxins are moving out of you. And so even though I got plucked out of, New York and dropped over in India at the Govardhan Eco Village for a month, this sattvic environment, very high consciousness, very nice people, very beautiful setting. It didn't mean that I was just wiped clear of all my impurities the second I stepped onto the campus, right? Actually, over the course of the 30 days, and probably even still, I was purging those toxins in my mind, toxins in my body, however you want to think about that. They were releasing while I was there. What does it look like to release an emotional or mental toxin? What do you guys think? What does it look like to release an emotional or mental toxin? Come on, Flora. Help me out here.
Pure hell.
Pure hell. Like the antithesis of like a spiritual retreat. Mallory was pulling at her hair.
Yeah, you gotta pull it out before you can.
Yeah. I cried a lot. There was a lot of tears. There was a lot of mental anguish of like, why? Why is this happening this way? I don't understand. I was confused, right? I could get specific about certain examples, but the reason why I had this too on there is because I didn't actually understand the depth of some of this patterning in me, right? Some of this material kind of egoic patterning that was residing deep down within me, because meanwhile, my mind was just trying to operate in the way that I've always let my mind operate. So that meant that if there was a cute guy walking by, I said, oh, he's kind of cute. What does his butt look like? Whoa. I'm in a spiritual atmosphere. What's going on here? And you start to catch yourself. Right? Hey, the teacher just said this about that pose. My other teacher 2 years ago said this about that pose. That teacher's probably wrong. I should probably tell the rest of the students, right? So pride is coming up. Lust is coming up. Envy is coming up. And it's kind of weird because it's like, why would those things be coming up if I'm in this spiritual environment? And my takeaway sort of became, it's because those things are in me. From the ways that I've acted in the past, the things that I've looked at in the past, the way that I've looked at people in the past. That's not to say I'm a bad person. It's just to say that I live in a culture where sometimes those things happen, right? Or a lot of times those things happen. So for me, really, this too became the conversation that I had with Krishna, the conversation that I had with this idea of God within my own heart. When I became aware of another impurity, it was like, oh, okay, this too. Will you help me? God within the heart, will you help me, Krishna? Will you help me, Source? Whatever your word for God is, will you help me take this too? Because I didn't realize I was so laden with these impurities. And it's what to speak of the attachment that we then have to them. I'm not trying to be a bad person by doing that. Instead, I just said, you know what, this too? Will you take this? Will you take this too? And this is one of the really beautiful things about Bhakti Yoga, Gaudiya Vaishnav lineage, Krishna as Supreme Personality of Godhead, also who comes to us in the mood of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is that the mood is one of mercy, love, acceptance, and inclusivity. So that the response to this too is like, yeah, this too. Yeah, this too. I'll help you with this as well. I'll help you with this as well. I'll help you with this as well. And the way that I think of that is like, it's really a conversation that I'm having with God. And that God gets to see that I'm taking interest in my own spiritual evolution, that I'm taking interest in my own purification process, that I'm showing up there 4:30 every morning in front of the deities, that I'm chanting the mantras, right? Because God's always watching. God, spirit resides within the heart. And so this is part of the collaboration. This is part of the conversation that we get to have. And I think it's probably perennial wisdom as well to say that the mercy is abundant in whatever one of these faiths or lineages you're coming to this from. Catholicism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, you name it, right? The perennial wisdom is that mercy abounds, inclusivity abounds, acceptance, love. And then we get to extend that, right? If you bring it back to this point number 7 that I was talking about earlier, we get to extend that to the people that we end up meeting on our path as well. When we encounter someone who's feeling a little lost, who's sort of caught in the darkness, who's in the throes of illusion or tragedy, whatever it is, we get to extend that mercy and that compassion to them as well, because it has been extended to us. Just thinking of where to go next with this. Is there anything anyone wants to say on that?
A lot of smiles.
Okay, let me give you guys one more little story. Is that okay? Oh man, then we'll chant, and then we'll call it an hour.
Yeah.
Is everyone having a good time?
Mhm.
All right, great. I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you all. Yukta Vairagya is a concept that I'm not going to get too deep into, probably because I don't fully even understand it all the way yet. But my understanding of it is that we can take what we do well and use it in service of the highest cause, right? And so I'm thinking if you're someone who goes to Catholic Mass and there's somebody who's a singer in the congregation, maybe they're a professional singer, right? Maybe they sing opera, maybe they sing musical theater. That person could also use that gift of a talented singing voice, for example, to serve the congregation, to serve God. So they can take what they've got and what they would otherwise maybe only use for material gain, and instead use it yukta vairagya in service of the highest. And so I included 2 pictures here to convey 2 different examples as to how I found this applied to me in my coming back from Govardhan Eco Village. I'll start with the one on the right, the left, because I already alluded to it a little bit. This is a statue that I brought back for a friend of mine who asked if I would bring him a 14-inch tall Krishna statue, to which I was like, of course. Of course I'll bring Krishna into your home. And so I got to have this statue in my home for a couple of days, and it was the couple of days that I just returned. And it's funny, it was all wrapped up in a box. And I was really low. I was really sad one night all by myself. And I'm like, I've got Krishna in a box over there in the corner. Let me bust this out and put it out. And as soon as I did, I started looking at all the different features of his form here. And I started sort of appreciating, like, yeah, he does have a little belly. That is so cute. And look at the shape of his feet and his ankles and the way that his head is sort of tilted to one side. I started appreciating all of these physical features about Krishna, about this statue. Where have I done that before? Where have I appreciated the physical features of another form almost obsessively before? And I alluded to it a second ago when I sort of said I caught myself even checking people out when I was at the Govardhan Eco Village, right? I'm talking to a guy and being like, wow, the jawline on this guy is just beautiful, right? Or the body, the arms, the this, the that. This is yukta vairagya in the sense that I don't have to actually change anything about what it is that I'm doing, the way that I'm interacting. Instead, I just change what I'm directing it towards. So it's not just this temporary human physical form, but rather, and it's a little bit of an esoteric idea, but rather I'm directing that facility of checking them out, appreciating them towards the supreme form, the most attractive form, as embodied by Krishna here in this statue. So that's one example. Another example, yukta vairagya, is that, throwing it way back to this slide. I spent 15 plus years learning how to do this kind of stuff. Learning how to sing and to tap dance and to sing harmonies and to sing to memorize lines. And I have to say that when the pandemic hit and theater stopped, there was a moment where I was a little bit like relieved, because it was a grind. It was a grind, always auditioning, always needing to book another job. You'd get a good job, but then that would end and you'd have to find another one, right? And I found a lot of my identity was in that struggle. And it was so important for me to try to get to Broadway, to get to the pinnacle of my industry. And I thought it would really say a lot about my reputation. It would say a lot about my work ethic. People would remember me then. But somehow over the course of the pandemic, I actually decided to kind of make a hard left and go away from the acting world. And I haven't really been back since. When the world reopened, I'd moved out of New York City and I wasn't going to auditions anymore. And there was a part of me that was actually kind of heartbroken. It was getting kind of heartbroken because it was like, I really miss performing. I worked so hard all these years. I built these skills. I've joined many ensembles. I really miss this. And I was even thinking in the weeks leading up to India, like, if I could do another show, if I could be on stage with a group of people and be singing in unison and in harmony and doing great choreography, I'd probably just like start crying because I'd be so overjoyed to be back in that space. And Krishna made this come true, but not in the way that I expected. So God will answer our prayers. It's so interesting, and not always in the way that we anticipate it's going to be answered. But I found myself sitting in a room with maybe 15 to 20 other people. We all had harmoniums because the first course that I did in India was a Kirtan Academy. So we're all working there with our harmoniums. And we were being asked by the teacher to sing all together. And then half the room was being asked to sing kind of a double time, a fast part. Half the room was asked to sing a slow part. I'm just sort of there singing, and all of a sudden I could feel this emotion bubbling up and the tears welling in my eyes as the room was filling with the sound of the mantra and the harmoniums. And it all just kind of clicked. It was like, this is that moment that I just pictured weeks before of wanting to be back on stage. It's not what I thought it was going to look like, but I'm still getting here to like lend my voice into an ensemble and direct it towards, again, Yukta Vairagya. This isn't necessarily just us trying to give the audience a good show. We're actually trying to direct the emanation of our voice, our singing, towards that highest form, to God. Does this make sense? So I could use, it wasn't for naught. My tap dancing, my learning how to hold harmonies, my learning how to memorize lines, whether I go back to theater or not. Now I get to memorize verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Now I get to learn complicated melodies on the harmonium. My friends tell me, you got to learn this melody. You got to learn this melody. So I get to use everything that I've developed up to this point in service of the highest ideal. All right, if you guys will stick around for 5 more minutes, we're going to do one more mantra, and then I'm going to put my hands together. If anyone has questions after that, you're welcome to ask them. And yeah, I just want to be mindful of everyone's time here too. Does that sound okay? You guys down to stick around for 5 more minutes? All right, sweet. And then I really would love to hear any reflections, takeaways, questions. Prabhu, shall we?
We shall.
So you're welcome to sing along if you'd like. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We'll do this a couple more times. Music is meditation. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We're gonna do it one more time, nice and light, and really feeling into your heart here, whether you're singing or just listening, letting that awareness drop right down to your heart space. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Krishna Bhagavan ki
Jai.
Harinam Sankirtan ki
Jai.
Jai. Wow, I'm so grateful to be sharing this space with you all. I have to say, it's a little bit of a vulnerable thing for me to be chanting kirtan with people who I've known from, like I said, my family growing up, to some people that I currently work with as clients, to friends, to people who are in the healing world. It brings a lot of stuff up, actually. It's very interesting. And we can take that right back to this idea of purification. The mantra, the sound vibration, it's just like a wash for the consciousness. And it's a practice too. A kirtan is really a practice. As I'm sitting here chanting, the things that are going through my mind, it's not always just, yes, I'm trying to bring it back to this idea of connection with the divine again, but it might be a little bit like, can they hear me okay? Does my voice sound okay? Are they liking this? Are my grandparents wondering what I was just doing for a month in India? So like, there's that side of it too, right? And that's the practice of it. It's like I hear it, but I just keep bringing it back. You keep bringing it back, just like your meditation practice, right? So we have time for any questions, thoughts, takeaways. I would love to even just hear like a realization or two that you share from something that you heard that you're going to take with you. Of course, I'm happy to answer any questions as well. So the floor is open for any of that stuff. Yeah, Kelly.
Oh, thank you.
I haven't.
There's an.
I don't know.
I don't know.
No, I think you're good.
Oh,
Oh,
I can.
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'll
Thank you,
Thank you,
Patrick.
Patrick.
I have
I
to
have to hop.
I'm always just inspired by
by
the
the
way
way
you
show up in the world.
And,
I took a lot of ways
this evening.
I took a lot of notes.
I'll send
I'll send you some of the
Great.
nuggets that I got for TPs and just. I'm integrating from experience last week too, so it's nice to hear some of your
integration feelings, and it's just hard to navigate being in the world and coming away from a deeply spiritual experience. So thank you for sharing that. And I liked what you said about routines and our bodies needing those rhythms. And a lot of great things. So I will be sharing more. But thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing
sharing your gifts.
Thank you, Kelly. Any other questions? Any other realizations? Any other shares that you want to? Come on, my grandma's got to have something to say.
Yes, grandma. Hey, we're getting a lot of Patrick. We've been. Where's the? 30 seconds.
I'm just thinking about our first togetherness at the theater, Patrick, when they walked down the aisle. Remember, what was
Lion King?
Lion King. It was sort of a beginning. Right.
It's so interesting, actually, and maybe I will just share this very, very, very quickly because I want to be mindful of your time. If you have to peace out, you're more than welcome to. This won't be long, but I do think it's worth sharing based on what my grandma just said, because the inclination that I had for theater from a young age, it really came from, my parents and my grandparents bringing me to see shows. And I gotta say, there's actually something about Bhakti yoga that's kind of like a musical. We're always singing, we're always dancing, we're getting dressed up. And on the last day that I was there, the way that this whole thing culminated actually was a festival called the Flower Festival in Mumbai. And I'm seeing if I have a quick video to share with you because it was so ecstatic. It was so ecstatic. When you look at the altar, it's very interesting. It looks like you're kind of looking at a stage of sorts, right? No, that's not the video. I don't think I'm going to be able to find the video I want to show you guys, but here's Flower Festival. Here's one. So in some ways, it's not a far cry from watching the ensemble of Lion King up there on stage and all their majesty with the choreography and the this and the that. Because actually in that moment, when the deities were being showered with petals, the priests were up there kind of throwing up, I was just like sobbing. I was completely overcome with emotion that I couldn't even contain it. And it was this sort of ecstatic moment for me. So thanks for saying that, Grandma. It's actually very, very apt. I'm glad you brought that in.
I also tried to say there's feedback.
Oh yeah, sorry.
For me, like my heart is just overflowing so much. Like to be in this moment in life right here with my grandparents who are 91 and 92 and a half. No other way around. 92 and 91 and a half. And so they've known Patrick forever. And they raised us and my dad's parents in this Catholic tradition with faith and family and giving back. And so I get to come and stay with my parents. And so sometimes I can peek in my dad's office and every morning he's got his routine with his prayer and meditation and the rosary beads, which is what I watch my grandparents do. And I watch my mom and dad do. So to just be in this moment of pure love and divinity, and watching you, Patrick, find your language for that, such a gift.
Yeah, I guess it runs in the family. And that's the thing with the perennial wisdom, right? It doesn't matter what name we use for it, what the exact practice is, that perennial wisdom, it encompasses all these faiths. Yes, George. Okay.
I wanted to echo that. I mean, especially for Christians that are experiencing the end of Lent and looking forward to Easter, you talk of purification and the enlightenment around the corner, and just so many of the images that you have. I know I can kind of repackaged with a Christian lens. And many of the things you were saying really spoke to my heart as part of the universal truths we all have. So I just want to say that I'm proud of you, and it's wonderful to experience this, especially with Karen, who I know, and the rest of the family. And to have the wedding picture behind your grandparents means so much too.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I got to get one of those.
Wedding picture?
Or just a wedding. Wow. Well, thank you all. Thanks for hanging out a little bit afterwards. And hey, stay in touch. I'd love to hear if you have some more thoughts after this is done, what came through for you, and spread it. Go out there and spread the good news.
Hold on, say that again.
And to come and visit us. Thank you.
I will. I'll be there as soon as I possibly can. Wow. I love all you guys. Hurdy ball. Talk to
Hi,
everyone.
Patrick.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work, Patrick.
Thank you, Flora. Wow.